We're back. Tuesday
We are
tips.
back.
We're here. We want to thank everybody that joins us every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Please make sure, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, go and like, subscribe, share, follow, turn on your notifications. Especially, tell all your people the best way to get Tuesday tips is to go to the J.B. Whitfield Ministries YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and turn on the notifications. That way you'll never miss an episode of Tuesday Tips.
And notification means it'll notify them.
It'll notify you. That little bell.
That little bell. And you know what? That's important. And it's not, we're not, I'll be honest with you. Now listen to what I'm about to say. I'm not looking to have numbers. I could care less about numbers. I got out of the book of Numbers years ago and got into the book of Acts. Hallelujah.
Yep.
But it's important that you know, simply because we truly believe that what we are doing, and God has instructed us to do this, that it helps. And like Marilyn Hickey said, you know, Christians are leaky.
Unfortunately.
We leak. And so we need to hear something more than once.
And that's why we come to you every week with a weekly conversation to give you leadership nuggets to grow. You know, Pastor Whitfield, last week we got lots of comments. You talked about, you had just celebrated as a church, you and Pastor Susan, 41 years of ministry. And the question I ask you is, what has kept you? And you looked at three things that were so powerful: the love of God, or for God, the love for your wife, and the love of the calling. And we talked a little bit about the gift versus calling. And I think we had a little bit more in you last week. We didn't get it all. We didn't draw out all the riches inside of this man.
Well, I can remember we ended last week. I said, I know what we're going to start on next week.
Well, good. And, I hope you
know. and it is the love of the calling and love of your calling. And how people, number one, how the enemy, Satan, will do everything he can to pull you out of your calling.
That's true.
And then how, but he will use several things. Number one, he'll use your ego, your pride.
Yep.
Number two, he will use people who will feed that ego and pride. And then number three, he will use your failures, your mistakes. Okay, so that's three things that Satan uses to try to pull pastors, evangelists, to try to pull leaders, to try to pull you out of your position, away from your calling, which really is your position, okay?
That's right. And you talk about that when you talk about organize yourself. You talk about the leader being in the right position.
Yeah. If you don't organize yourself, then you will never be able to organize your leaders, nor will you be able to organize teams.
Right.
And so the enemy will use your own pride and your own ego to get you out of position. He will use people that love you, people that you love and that you respect, and he will use your failures to try to, well, I could add even to that, he'll use your failures and your successes, but I think that goes back to pride and ego.
Right.
That he will use your failures to try to get you out of your position. Let me give you an example. All right. Number one, what I see happen in so many young pastors, especially when they start their church. Let's say you got a church that's just starting out. The pastor is working a job.
Yep.
All right. And or he's not working a job and he started the church from scratch, and he knows God's going to take, maybe his spouse is got a great job, or she's the one starting the church, whatever.
Sure.
That they're starting out. It's a startup church, okay? One of the biggest tools that Satan uses against a young, I'm going to look at this camera because I want you to hear what I'm about to say. One of the biggest tools that Satan uses against startup churches, against pastors that can really preach. They're really good preachers.
Yep.
They're great preachers. They've got really great revelation. But they're a great orator. In other words, they can communicate their message well. It comes across well. Miracles begin to happen. The anointing is on their life. They're not just a great speaker, they're an anointed speaker.
Yep.
So what he will do, what the Satan will do, he did it to Jesus. It's the pride of life.
Tried. Yep.
And if you are the Son of Man, turn these stones into bread.
Right.
Okay. If you are the Son of Man. So Satan only has three
That's right.
attacks.
That's right.
The pride of life, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of eyes. He used those three against Satan. Well, he uses those same three against us
Come
and against
on.
our calling.
So
all right?
true. So
So
true.
what happens is you begin to preach. And I began to, 1982, once I settled in my gifting,
Yeah.
and I knew my calling was
Right.
a pastor. But once I settled in my gifting of a preacher, not a teacher, and an expository preacher. Once I settled on that, then I was comfortable.
Right.
All right. But here's the deal: it really took off. God began to bless us. We began to grow.
Yep.
And people began to tell me how wonderful a preacher I was. Well, then I began to get invitations to go.
Oh.
I began to be invited to other churches
Yeah.
to preach.
Yeah.
And I preached it. We're talking 1982. We started our church in March. When October of 82, I preached in a 5,000 member church. All right. I preached in church that had 800,000 members, and I was preaching, and man, I thought, okay, this is it, man.
Look out.
I'm called to travel. I even bought a van.
There you go.
I bought a van
One of
that
those
you
conversion vans.
conversion van that you could sleep in. All right. I got me a driver, and we're gonna drive around the country, and you know what happened? I lost focus.
Yeah.
I lost focus of what I was called. I wasn't called to travel. I wasn't called to be a traveling preacher and evangelist. I was called to pastor. Now, what did I sacrifice? All right, what did I hurt? Number one, I hurt my family.
Yeah.
Because I was gone.
Yeah.
Number two, I hurt the family of God at Agape Faith Church because I was gone. All right. And then number three, I hurt my calling.
Yeah, because you were out of your lane.
I was out of my lane. I was wanting to travel. And listen to me. Some of you young pastors out there, you're anointed of God. There's no question about it. You know what I was told? I was told you're bigger than Clemens.
Woo!
You are bigger than Clemens. You need to move. You need to move to Texas. You need to move to Dallas. You need to do this. You're bigger than Clemens. Well, I can tell you right now, I thought I was. Why? They fed my ego.
Yeah.
They fed my pride and they fed my ego.
Sure.
And then and I thought God was doing it, but I'm gonna just tell you, the enemy was setting up opportunities for me. That you and I know young pastors right now that you want to try. Well, first of all, let me share this with you. Now, I hate to even admit this, but the finances were good too. Pastor Michael.
Yeah, that was kind of.
We're struggling. We're startup church.
Yep.
I'm not getting a salary. I'm getting a little picayune salary.
That's right.
All right. I got 4 children. They like to eat.
That's
okay.
right.
And I'd go minister somewhere, and they take up an offering for me.
That's right.
They take up an offering for me.
For me.
For
That's
me.
right.
Not for the church.
Come
for
on.
me.
I've been there.
All right.
Been there.
So the money was good.
It looked good. Yeah, that's
and
that
it looked
enticing.
good,
Yep.
and it was very enticing.
Yep.
And I can remember accepting preaching positions just for the offering. Had nothing to do with the calling.
The call.
And you know what? They'd be some of the smallest offerings I'd get. I went to one big church.
Yep,
because it was the money.
Yeah.
I went because of the money. I didn't go because I wanted to preach and see people saved.
Now, this is Pastor getting real with you as leaders. He's getting real.
Yeah. Now, listen, I did want to preach. I did want to see people saved. I did want to see them healed, but that's not why I went. That's
There was an ulterior motive there.
My ulterior motive was the offering because it was a big church.
And you knew that was going to help balance your family.
Then I accepted an invitation to go to a small church. Didn't care if I got an offering or not.
And walked out with the biggest.
Walk out with a bigger
checks.
offering than the one at the big church. Why? Because it was God and not my motive. So, number one, the enemy will. You got to stay in your position.
Yep.
And I challenge you that are being pulled out of your calling because your pride and your ego, and because others are telling you need to go here, you need to go there. And the church needs you, especially if you're a startup. If you're a 200-member church, 350-member church, you got a good-sized church. Financially,
you should be stable.
You're going to be okay.
Yep.
But your church needs you.
You're the pastor. You're the shepherd. You're the one that leads the sheep. They know the shepherd's voice.
That's it.
And see, we've seen other, Pastor, and I know you've had to deal with this as you've grown. Now, Pastor's telling you stories from his heart that we're talking 41 years of ministry. These things didn't happen. What he's saying didn't happen last year or the year before.
Oh, no.
This was years ago.
I could leave right now. I could miss 2 Sundays in a row now, and it not matter.
And not matter to you, to the sheep,
not matter to me or the church, because I'm in my position.
Exactly. You're in your lane.
And God has called others up behind me that do walk in that grace that we talked about.
Yep.
So okay, go ahead.
And I think what you're sharing is so important for some leaders out there today, no matter what position you're in. You know, Pastor Chris Morgan sent in a question a while back that talked about what does it look like for the pastor or leader to stay in their position in various levels of times of ministry, whether you're a startup church, a medium-sized church, or a large church. And the enemy, just like he tried to deter Jesus, would like nothing more than to get pastors and leaders out of their position, out of their lane, looking at other things. Go back to those 3 things you talked about: the pride of life, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes. And more than ever in this day and age, with social media, with the things that are going on, a pastor has got to stay in their lane and securely protected.
They do. And it's not only their lane as far as their gifting and their calling, but it's also they got to maintain their personal life, because Satan came at me. He sent in 41 years of pastoring, he sent 3 women to this church to seduce me. He sent them in. One of them came in, and I saw her. And when she came in, she was beautiful. Now, in the natural, now I got to tell the truth.
Right.
A beautiful woman.
Right.
All right. And I told my armor bearer, it was Bill Horn, as a matter of fact, was my armor bearer.
Big Bill.
And I told Bill Horn, because the Lord spoke to me and said, Satan has sent her here to seduce you. I told Bill, I said, if that woman gets close to me, knock her down. That's exactly what I told him. And, of course, when I saw her, she came in, and here she came. She came right up, coming down the aisle toward me. I said, Bill, let's go to my office. I left. I didn't wait to hug other people's necks. I left. I was not going to allow that temptation to even get anywhere close to me. So I left and went to my office. And just like Joseph, took off running. I took off running. All right. The other 2, I didn't recognize it. My wife did.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, one of them, I told my wife, I said, there's no way she has come to seduce me. I don't believe that. But I listened to her.
That's right.
I did.
Wisdom, wise counsel.
I listened to wise counsel and wisdom, and would make sure that I was nowhere close to that woman, make sure that I was nowhere in proximity of where she was.
There you go.
Okay. And, the devil will use anything he possibly can.
Yep.
You know, I've never had an issue with money. as far as the church is concerned. Right. Never handled it, don't handle it now. Don't know who tithes and who doesn't tithe unless it's a staff member or a leader. God's told me, listen to me now, God's told me to check staff members' tithing records. And God's told me to check leaders' tithing records.
Not the amount, but
are they tithing?
Are they?
Yep. Are they tithing? Yep. Are they tithers?
Yep. Yep.
And I've done it. I did it with a pastor. He told me to check a certain pastor's tithing record one time, and I knew what he made because he was on staff. But he wasn't tithing. Hadn't tithed for 3 years. I didn't even know it. And here he is up on the platform taking up tithes and offerings and not even tithing. Woo. And, he's not here now. But anyway, the whole point is I don't know who gives, who doesn't give. I don't want to know. Right. Why? Because I'm not going to let their money move me.
That's right.
Lester Summerall told me in 1985 or 84, I can't remember, 84 or 85, he was at our church. He told me, he said, this is a great church. And he said, you're going to grow. And he said, you need to decide right now what you're going to do with money. You need to decide right now what kind of house you're going to live in, what kind of car you're going to drive. He said, because one day you're going to have all the money you need.
Right.
And one day you'll be able to live in any kind of house you want, drive any kind of car you want. And he said, you're going to have to make that decision. See, speaking of money, can we do that next program?
Let's do that next program.
Because I got a couple examples I'd like to give on that.
We need to share some of those examples. Let's recap real quick today, Pastor Whitfield.
All right.
We talked about what has kept you and Miss Susan for 41 years, the love of the calling, staying in your lane, in your place. And the enemy tries to use the pride or ego, tries to use the people and possibly failures. And these are great points. Mark your calendar. I want to leave you with this. Lead 23, Kenya, Africa, August 17th, 18th, and 19th. If you're anywhere around the area, registration is open right now.
And they can sign up to go with us, can't
That's
they?
right. They can go. You can go with us on that trip.
And if you're a pastor or a leader, you can teach.
That's right. We'll be doing
workshops
and breakout sessions. We'll be visiting the orphanage we have there. And then
taking a little...
a safari to see some wildlife. Then October 12th, 13th, and 14th is Lead 23 right here, Clemens, North Carolina. We're going to have some special guests, John Grunwald, Bishop Silas Johnson. You don't want to miss. Registration is open right now for that. So reserve your spot because we will fill the sanctuary and you don't want to miss it. Pastor Whitfield, next week we are going to continue this talk.
Because I want to talk about money.
Money. Money. Oh, we're going to get into the money talk.
Money.
Pastor Michael and Pastor Whitfield saying goodbye. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for joining us on Tuesday Tips. We invite you to like, follow, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. To find out more information about JB Whitfield Ministries, visit us at jbwhitfield.com.